Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I am Shannon Linker, DMA League Director of Adult Programs, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here with us tonight for our lecture, Representing Afro-Atlantic Histories, as a part of our exhibition, Afro-Atlantic Histories. Co-organized by the Museum of Fine Arts Houston and the Museo de Arte de Sao Paulo took away my light here, sorry. In collaboration with the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., Afro-Atlantic Histories is composed of around 100 works of art and documents produced in Africa, the Americas, the Caribbean, and Europe from the 17th century to the present day. Through a global perspective, the exhibition engages visitors in a series of dialogues that re-examines histories and stories of enslavement, resilience, and the struggle for liberation. Tonight, we'll hear an exhibition overview from Dr. Kanitra Fletcher, followed by a conversation with our very own Ade Omotosho. And now, I am honored to introduce our speakers for this evening. Ade, the newly appointed Nancy and Tim Hanley Assistant Director of Contemporary Art at the DMA. Omotosho is a native North Texan who specializes in contemporary art of the global Black diaspora. He comes to the museum with curatorial and publications experience at the Perez Museum of Art in Miami, the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, and most recently, the Clark Art Institute. Ade is the coordinating curator for Afro-Atlantic Histories exhibition at the Dallas Museum of Art, along with Catherine Broadbeck, the Hoffman Family Senior Curator of Contemporary Art. Dr. Kanitra Fletcher is Associate Curator of African American and Afro-Diasporic Art at the National Gallery of Art and organizer of the U.S. tour of Afro-Atlantic Histories. Fletcher came to Washington from the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, where she oversaw the presentation of such major traveling exhibitions as Soul of a Nation, Art in the Age of Black Power, and Odyssey, Jack Whitten's sculpture. Her previous museum experience includes the Bronx Museum of Arts, the Museum of Modern Art, and the New Museum of Contemporary Art. Since 2011, she has curated the video program for Landmarks, the public art program at the University of Texas in Austin, where she earned her master's degree in Latin American Studies. Fletcher received her PhD in the history of art from Cornell University. And with that, please help me welcome Dr. Kanitra Fletcher.
Thank you. Good evening. All right, so thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. This tour has been a very long but exciting ride. And I'm really happy that it begins and ends in my home state of Texas. So thank you to Augustine, the Dallas Museum of Art. Thank you, Christina and Shannon, for organizing the event tonight. And of course, thank you to Ade and Catherine and the entire installation team for realizing such a stunning presentation that really does honor the art and the subject matter. So I'm going to present an overview of the show, going over the sections of the exhibition and also some of the highlights, and I'm going to read to keep us on time. So, Afro-Atlantic Histories. It explores the legacy and the impact of the African diaspora, the cultural formations and exchanges resulting from the movement of people across oceans, and how the stories, that images and objects that tell have shaped our understanding of Afro-descendant peoples and the Afro-Atlantic world at large. The exhibition was originally presented at Sao Paulo's Museum of Art in 2018, and for the U.S. tour, it gathers over 100 artworks and documents into 6 sections that present a wide range of media, styles, and perspectives of artists of African and European descent, examining the visual cultures and artistic innovations of Afro-Atlantic territories from the 17th to the 21st century. The word histories in the title indicates the plurality of the narratives represented in the exhibition. They are fictional and non-fictional, mythical and factual, highlighting narratives that have been left aside, at the margins, and forgotten. Afro-Atlantic Histories is open, diverse, and inclusive, refusing the canon of traditional art history. The show resists the idea of a definitive history or quote-unquote grand narrative of the diaspora as well, and presents diverse accounts of the past that challenge long-established history hierarchies and forge new questions and connections. Because the exhibition is arranged thematically, not chronologically or geographically, a transnational and transhistorical dialogue occurs among the works, reflecting the parallels and frictions among the many histories of Afro-descendant peoples. By juxtaposing historical art with more contemporary points of view, we see the ways in which earlier European imagery has been challenged and recontextualized by Black artists in later works to represent the lingering effects of fraught histories, but also demonstrate the creative ways artists have radically reimagined those past with an eye towards the future. So the first section is Maps and Margins, in which the art powerfully evokes early crossings and encounters of the Black diaspora. Alluding to the middle passage, Aaron Douglas's Into Bondage from 1936 is a powerful depiction of enslaved Africans bound for the Americas. The composition is encircled by layers of foliage in concentric circles. In the center is a line of shackled figures solemnly walking towards the ocean. A woman at left raises her hands, which directs our eyes towards the slave ships on the horizon, as the central male figure raises his head towards the star in the sky as a gesture of hope and determination. And it's also wonderful to have this work on view here in Dallas, as Into Bondage was one of 4 panels commissioned for the Texas Centennial Exposition held in this city in 1936. So it's sort of a homecoming for this painting. And the painting was shown in the quote-unquote Hall of Negro Life, which opened on Juneteenth in 1936, and showcased exhibitions on the progress of Black Americans in a variety of fields, including the visual art. 2 major motifs in this section are maps and ships. And how did we go back here? Okay. And Hank Willis Thomas' work, A Place to Call Home, Africa, America, Reflection, is a large-scale, mirrored stainless steel wall sculpture that draws a fictional map of an African-American continent. In this imagined Americas, the area that corresponds to South America is replaced by the African continent. Thomas's sculpture demonstrates how maps are representations, not realities. A map reflects the perspectives of its creator, who shapes the world they want to see to tell the story they want to tell. And the design of the sculpture refers to the senses of both connection and detachment that many African Americans feel in relation to Africa and the U.S. In this exhibition, however, A Place to Call Home prompts all visitors to occupy this imagined space and literally see themselves in relation to Afro-diasporic histories. The motif of ships, of course, comes from the slave ship and images depicting those vessels, such as descriptions of a slave ship, which was printed by the abolitionist James Phillips in 1789 to widely expose the cruelty of the slave trade. It pictures a British slave ship named Brooks and how 500 or usually more people, I think it went up to 609 people at one point, even though it was really built for approximately 450 bodies, how these people were packed into the lower deck for 2 months as it sailed from Africa to the Caribbean. Over 7,000 posters of this image were printed and distributed, and it has become one of the most recognizable and unforgettable images associated with the transatlantic slave trade. Since the mid-20th century, numerous Black artists have represented the slave ship in their artwork, and these images exemplify how contemporary artists have used the icon to reflect the trauma of slavery and memorialize their ancestors. Okay. The artists include Hosanna Paulino, whose work, Permanence of Structures, combines historical imagery, the slave ship icon, ethnographic photos of a naked Black Brazilian man, colonial Portuguese tiles depicting animals attacking prey, and a cranium in reference to craniometry. These all allude to how colonialism and pseudoscientific theories were widespread and have persisted, contributing to structural racism in Brazil, the U.S., and beyond. It also speaks to how images are reproduced and recontextualized and effectively travel across time and space to be appropriated and reinterpreted. I'll say also, José 𝘈𝘧𝘰-𝘈𝘕 rethinks what a slave ship might mean and reimagines what it could look like. For him, as it is a ship commanded by the enslaved. In his sculpture, we see rows of Black figures above deck transporting themselves, navigating the waters and their own futures, asserting their strength and agency and recalling actual histories of Africans overtaking slave ships. The next section is Enslavements and Emancipations, which illustrates the terror of enslavement and struggles for emancipation. European artists frequently illustrated the conditions of captivity, providing glimpses of the past, and their art, combined with documents recording the sales of enslaved people and advertisements for their recapture after escape, indicates the everyday cruelty and absolute loss of freedom. Artists also have confronted this brutality by incorporating historic images of slavery in their own work, evoking the horrors of the past and the trauma from these histories that persist today. Based on a real event in which over 2,000 people at a slave auction intentionally placed low bids, Thomas Satterwhite Noble's painting, The Last Sale of Slaves in St. Louis, is an unfinished painting of grand scale that features a group of Black people presented for sale on the steps of the St. Louis courthouse. Noble centers a Black enslaved woman holding an infant in her arms, romanticizing the figure who caresses her child with downcast eyes, creating a somber, touching moment. In response to histories like those depicted in Noble's painting, Nona Faustine created portraits of herself, embodying the experience of Black women of those past for her photographic series titled White Shoes. In this image, from her body spring their greatest wealth, Faustine poses at an intersection on Wall Street, where New York City's first slave market operated from 1711 to 1762. Faustine is completely nude, except for a pair of white high-heeled shoes and metal cuffs that bind her wrists, standing on a plain wooden box in the middle of the intersection. This reenactment of a scene of an enslaved woman presented at an auction recalls how the bodies of Black women were forms of currency or commodities traded like stocks on modern-day Wall Street. As sources of capital, they generated wealth passed down to future generations living today. Faustine bravely portrays the struggle, but also the survival of Black women who would continue to create culture and community of which she is living proof. And the violence of slavery cannot be understood without considering the struggle for freedom. From revolts to rebellions, uprising, escapes, even suicides, resistance has always been part of histories of enslavement. While abolition has been portrayed as a gift from white saviors that Black people were grateful to receive in historical works, the exhibition also presents artwork that reflects the tireless struggles of enslaved people and free Black populations who fought for emancipation. The 1834 painting celebrating the emancipation of slaves in British dominions, August 1834, by Samuel Raven, expresses abolitionist sentiments, but depicts enslaved people learning of their freedom by a notice posted on a palm tree, suggesting their freedom was a result of British benevolence rather than the persistent revolts across the Caribbean and elsewhere. And A.A. Lamb's Emancipation Proclamation from 1864 similarly portrays the end of the Civil War and represents freedom and victory through the form of a white woman riding on a chariot, leading Ulysses Grant with the flag held high. Lincoln is adjacent with the proclamation, and the Union Army trails behind him, but the image suggests that freedom was a gift bestowed upon the enslaved people who were relegated to the background of the composition. However, Portrait of Cinque by Nathaniel Jocelyn depicts the subject who led enslaved Africans to take over the Amistad, pictures him who led Africans to take over the Amistad slave ship in 1839. And the ship arrived in Long Island, New York, where the Africans were charged with murder. Robert Purvis, a wealthy Black abolitionist from Philadelphia, commissioned this portrait of 𝘕𝘰, who is portrayed as a Greco-Roman idol to contradict prevailing notions of Africans as savages at the time. And the image was duplicated as an engraving and widely disseminated, influencing popular opinion on the case, which was ruled in favor of the Africans by the Supreme Court that decided 𝘕𝘰 and the African defendants had been kidnapped and sold illegally. The Everyday Lives section addresses how Africans who arrived in the Americas and the Caribbean created their own spaces in response to new experiences of displacement. This section features images of daily life that reflect moments of labor and leisure in Black communities, thematically organized paintings juxtapose works from different periods and regions, proposing a dialogue among pictures in the context of farms, markets, street scenes, and interiors. These depictions would counter those of European artists who romanticized Black subservience and normalized forced labor. And they include Franz Post, who painted the first representations of the so-called New World in northeastern Brazil. After his return to the Netherlands, he continued painting Brazilian themes, but with fantastical elements as seen in Landscape with Anteater, in which an anteater and an armadillo appear larger than life. And I don't know if you can see it, and but this is where the anteater and armadillo are in the corner. And even more fanciful than the oversized creatures is a depiction of Black people living in relative harmony with European colonists and indigenous people, given the false impression that the violence and conflicts of slavery and colonialism did not exist. Later imagery by Afro-descendant artists present the daily lives of Black homes and neighborhoods in more humanistic ways. In Untitled Return from the Plantation, Dos Prazeres portrayed the place he called Little Africa. He depicts an area outside of the city where workers return from the fields with the day's harvest. The appearance of the group with their bodies centered in the canvas, almost emerging, suggests a sense of community and intimacy. And seemingly minor moments of daily life are also shown in this section. Barrington Watson, one of the most influential artists of post-independence Jamaica, excelled at portraiture, as seen in The Conversation. He lovingly captures a trio of Black women in casual conversation as they take a break from daily labor. The pastel palette confers an angelic, spiritual quality to the painting, as does the glow from the monochromatic background that effectively transports the women from the realities of daily labor. Finally, Black artists also referred to adverse aspects of everyday life in their communities, such as state-inflicted violence. The video intervention in Rio, How to Survive an Improper Approach, was made in 2018 after the Brazilian government had sent the army to police the streets of Rio de Janeiro state. Two Black YouTubers, Junior and Santiago, and a journalist, Carvalho, created this video with tips for Black people living in the favelas who were more likely to be profiled, searched, and killed by police. In the video, they advise viewers on how to behave when approached by military police or the army, warning them to have their documents on themselves when they go out, tell friends where they are going, and to always have their cell phone charged for making calls or recordings, among other recommendations. Next is Rites and Rhythms. Spiritual and musical traditions passed down and adapted through generations have been central to the cultures of the Black Atlantic. Images of festivals, ceremonies, and other rituals have circulated within the African diaspora since the 16th century. This section includes depictions of various types of music and dance, including scenes from Carnival, which spread throughout the coast of Black Atlantic. Senek Oben's Carnival is a bright, joyous portrayal of the celebration in Haiti, where a dense crowd of costumed and masked characters occupies a small village. Their dresses varied, individually and painstakingly rendered. The scene is full of color and as revelers spill out on the streets for their festivities in front of brightly hued houses set against emerald green hills. Ceremonies, foods, ornaments, and different types of priests and priestesses were reinvented in the Americas and the Caribbean. However, they share the use of African languages and references in their songs, divinities, and views of the cosmos, world, and nature. Accordingly, the exhibition features 2 dance staffs for Shango, the Yoruba deity of thunder, lightning, and justice. Shango was revered among communities of enslaved peoples in the Caribbean and the Americas, and still is venerated by many across the African diaspora as its qualities evoke strength, power, and resistance. Shango and other deities serve as points of departure for imagery that refers to many African-derived traditions that developed in the diaspora. David Driscoll incorporates the symbolism of Shango in his painting Current Forms Yoruba Circle. Africa significantly informed the artist and scholar's creativity and the development of his own visual language. Between 1969 and 1972, he traveled to Senegal, the Ivory Coast, Ghana, and Nigeria, which deepened his understanding of West African aesthetic and religious traditions. In Current Forms, Shango's circular head dominates the canvas, filling the upper half, while the lower portion contains calligraphic swirls and shapes evocative of Yoruba masks, with the surface animated by strokes and splashes of purple, orange, and blue paint. Current Forms exemplifies Driscoll's ability to synthesize African religious tradition with modernist painting practices. Color-filled and action painting merge with West African symbolism in this bold, compelling image. Portraits is the penultimate section and presents leaders, heroes, and ordinary individuals, news and fashion plates, invented subjects, and the artists themselves in a range of media. One of the earliest portraits is Frederic Bazille's Young Woman with Peonies from 1870, in which the subject poses as a vendor offering flowers for sale. This celebrated image speaks to communities impacted by French colonization in the Caribbean, but also their presence, specifically Black women, in the 19th century Paris. Their role as business people, part of the economy and modern life in the city, and their role in art history as models and muses. It thus recalls Edouard Manet's earlier famous painting, Olympia, in which a Black maid presents flowers to its white subject. However, here the Black woman addresses the viewer and their gaze as an active subject and a participant in her portrayal. Traditional portrait galleries display images of government heads, religious leaders, and members of the elite, almost always white people, usually white men. Historic portraits of Black people are rare, and portraits of Black people depicted as individuals as opposed to types are rarer. Afro-Brazilian artist Dalton Paula therefore responds with a series of paintings that commemorate Black leaders who have been excised from the official versions of histories and whose likenesses were never recorded. 𝘈𝘳𝘈𝘵 and 𝘕𝑂𝑠 were abolitionist leaders who rebelled against the Brazilian slaveholding system. The activities of both were uncovered by the Portuguese crown, and they were sentenced to death, yet they remain important figures for Black Brazilians. Paula made their portraits from composites of historical photographs of Black Brazilians or living people he encountered in Black Brazilian communities. As 𝘈𝘳𝘈𝘵 and 𝘕𝑂 are not mentioned in traditional Brazilian historiography, the portraits raise important questions about the erasure of Black histories and the authorship and agendas of official narratives. Resistance and Activisms is the final section and takes its cues from histories of resistance and activism and the powerful pursuit of self-determination, showing how Black populations have created their own religions, institutions, family ties, and social practices that continue to inspire activists and artists today. Works in this section also reflect visual protest strategies and demonstrations in banners, textiles, performance, and other forms of expression that have circulated through the Black Atlantic and played a central role in activism. Several works place Black women at the center of struggles for equality and respect. Afro-Peruvian artist Victoria Santa Cruz's video, They Shouted Black at Me, showcases her poetry and performance and describes her evolution from being ridiculed and ashamed of her Black features as a child to proudly proclaiming, "Sí soy negra," or "Yes, I am Black." Her exclamation affirms the dignity of Black women across the Afro-Americas who embrace the beauty of Blackness in the face of historical and personal denigration. Several artists also refer to the history of the civil rights movement, such as Glenn Ligon, Alma Thomas, and Theaster Gates. Gates's In Case of Race Riot, Break the Glass is a fire hose sealed inside a glass box. Its appearance calls to mind objects used in case of emergency, as the title reminds us of the historic use of high-pressure fire hoses to assault Black protesters during the civil rights movement. This work evokes the dark irony, then and now, of public resources used to inflict pain and harm against the very populations they are supposed to protect. So in closing, because of the movement of Black people across the globe for almost 500 years, one might say that Africa is everywhere. And Afro-Atlantic Histories shows what Black people have engendered despite the circumstances of their arrival in the Americas. It focuses on the overlooked, forgotten, and ignored roles and presence of Black and African people on all sides of the Atlantic, and how that presence has shaped and enriched arts, culture, religion, politics, economies, and shaped histories of the world. Thank you. Okay, so I think now Ade and I will have a little conversation about what I just talked about and take questions.
Hello? Okay.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming out as we continue to celebrate the opening of Afro-Atlantic Histories. I think my mom is here. Hey, Mom. I love you.
Hi, Mom. We all love you.
I'm really thrilled to be joined by Kanitra Fletcher. We actually go way back. We were colleagues at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston. It was back in like 2017.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. You're quizzing me.
I think it was like 2017. 2016, 17?
Post-Trump, so it was 2017. I remember. That's a marker for me.
Yeah.
So I guess late 2016.
2017, yeah.
17, yeah.
But yeah, it was great working with Kanitra at MFA Houston. Following my time at MFA Houston, I was then working at the Perez Art Museum in Miami. And I remember a visit that you made with some of the curatorial team for the exhibition.
Right.
To present the exhibition, to propose it to the curatorial team at the Perez Art Museum.
Right.
And that was maybe 2017,
I feel
18?
like 2018?
2018, yeah.
Or 19, yeah. It may have been late 2018.
Right.
Yeah.
So all that to say that this project that you'll see in the galleries has had a very long genesis. And so I'm wondering if you could maybe just begin by sharing some of the kind of early planning stages for this exhibition. What was it like to work and collaborate with such an international team for this project?
Well, thank you for having me here to begin with. I'm really excited to see you again in your new role. It's really exciting for you and for Dallas. So when I started this journey, it was in Miami, right? And MOSB director, Adriana Pedrosa, had come to visit with their chief curator, and we had a meeting with then chief curator of Perez Art Museum, Tobias.
Tobias Ostrander, yes.
And it was like a very long, all-day meeting. We were just thinking, how can we make this into a tour for the States, and thinking about how it can relate to U.S. audiences in a way that made sense. And we felt like keeping the familiar names of the artists, keeping familiar names such as Driscoll and Sarr,
right,
and artists that U.S. audiences would be familiar with was important. But I also felt that it was important to keep the larger Brazilian presence in the show. For me, I wanted to honor the origins of the exhibition.
Right.
And also make sure that U.S. audiences became aware of the realities of the Black diaspora. I think a lot of people don't realize that the largest Black population outside of Nigeria is in Brazil.
Yeah.
Only 6% of enslaved Africans arrived in the U.S., like maybe 350,000 if I'm correct, something like that, but over 40% went to Brazil. And so that kind of information I wanted to make clear with this show. It sort of offer a corrective, because often Black Americans are centered in discourses on Blackness and kind of made to stand in for communities outside of the U.S. And so I wanted to make sure that was clear with the formation of this. But, you know, Pam wasn't able to participate, so it ended up being put on hold for a while. And MFA Houston, we weren't sure what was going to happen until we got this incredible grant from the Ford Foundation. So thank you, Darren Walker and the Ford Foundation.
We love Darren Walker.
And a Texan as well. And then we were able to restart the show.
Yeah.
And solicit other institutions to join the tour. And so the National Gallery joined, LACMA in LA joined, and DMA joined. And what happened was I started working on the show in Houston, and while I was working on the show in Houston, my position that I have now opened up. I applied for it, got that job, and so I ended up working with between two institutions. So it got interesting after a while.
Yeah.
But
I said, yeah, your move to the NGA, sort of like while you were still planning the exhibition,
right. So,
as a staff member of MFA Houston.
Right,
Yeah.
and it was sort of tricky negotiations with time and labor and things like that, but it worked out well. And yeah, I mean, it's been a journey. It's been a journey.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But, you know, I also ended up having to make some changes as well to the show.
Right, because the original presentation, the show was originally presented at the Sao Paulo Museum of Art in 2018, and I didn't get to see it there, but my colleague Catherine did, and you know, it was a really sprawling, expansive exhibition.
Right.
There were over 400 objects in that presentation.
Right.
And so somehow you all managed to get it down to just over 100 for the U.S. tour.
Right.
How did you go about condensing something that was so vast?
Well, the first thing that I had to do was cut the sections.
Okay.
And so the two sections that I did cut, one was called Roots and Trances, and the other was Modernisms. And these were actually the smallest of the exhibitions. They didn't cover the spans of years were shorter than, you know, the other sections, which covered 500 years technically of work.
Yeah.
And also with Modernisms, that was a section that was really dealing with art historical movements and not really like the stories and narratives of people's lives and cultures. So I felt, you know, those two were the first to go. But I did move some artworks out of those sections into other sections. And that's what's really exciting, is that you can see how some of the works in the exhibition sort of overlap sections. You know, some works that are maps and margins might work in enslavements and emancipations, because of course artwork imagery can't be confined to just one theme, right? And so what I see with your installation is that some changes were made as well, which is really exciting, that you can take those liberties and find new connections. And so I'd love to hear about what you, how you changed it.
It was a real, honor really to kind of take this show and extend the work that you had done on it, you know, to kind of put our own spin on an exhibition that is already so fantastic. I saw the show initially at MFA Houston, and then I saw it again at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art this past spring.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
I think great benefit of the show and seeing the show here is that there's so much more space in our galleries.
Yes, much more.
It's a very dense presentation, and so I think when I'd seen it at other venues, things felt tight, and so I'm happy that it feels like there's more room for the artworks to breathe, and I hope that comes through as you see the show. I think I had the most fun hanging the portrait section. When I started in April, the process for the exhibition was well underway. You know, we were starting to kind of finalize our floor plan and contracts, but that was the one section that I had a lot of room to sort of, you know, come up with a new layout that I hadn't seen, you know, at 𝘈𝘧𝘳𝘰 or in Houston, but that I felt would work really well in our Barrel Vault galleries. So when you see the portrait sections, you'll see this great print by the South African artist 𝘈𝘧𝘳𝘰 anchoring the space. And then the two walls to the left and right are staggered hangs that have works by Romare Bearden, Barkley Hendricks, �々𝘳𝘳𝘈𝘬𝘈𝘬𝘁𝑜𝑑𝑢𝑇𝑜𝑙𝑎. So many great artists in that space. So,
and that's the biggest section, so you have like a lot to work with.
Lots to work with, and lots to kind of figure out with in real time in this space. I think that was the section that me and Catherine sort of spent the most time in and install, just figuring out like what spacing we wanted between the artworks, like if the 𝘈𝘧𝘳𝘈𝘬𝘈 that you had mentioned would fit on the same wall with the Delacroix. I think it's a really great juxtaposition, but you know, we had to kind of figure out how it was all gonna fit. So it was. I think it was really fun to just present it anew and to extend the great work that has already been done.
Yeah, there's so many possibilities with the show. I also love how I spoke about this last night, how I love the pops of color.
Yes, we love the accent walls.
Like draw you into each of the sections.
There's a green similar to the one that you're wearing tonight that is in there.
You love green.
That's my favorite, I was curious about maybe the kind of intellectual origins of the project on your end. You know, when you walk into the exhibition and read the introduction, you'll notice that the Black British scholar and theorist Paul Gilroy is invoked with his own concept of the Black Atlantic, which was certainly central to this project. But I think you also feel the influence of someone like Robert Farris Thompson, who's now late and was a scholar that studied in large part Yoruba spiritual traditions like Ifa, and you'll feel that especially in Rites and Rhythms, a section that is devoted to the ways that Ifa of the Yoruba has traveled across the Atlantic. So I'm wondering what sort of scholars were shaping your own thought as you started to prepare the exhibition. And I know you yourself have a background in studying the work of Black Brazilian artists. So maybe if you could share a bit how you did the rigorous work of coming up with your concept for the show.
Right. Well, I also want to definitely give props to Ade Omotosho and Erison Heraclitu, who were the two Black Brazilian curators who did the large amount of organizing this exhibition for the Brazilian venue. It's really, thanks to them and their intellectual property that this came about. Yes, I did my master's work at University of Texas at Austin on Black Brazilian art and cultural politics. So I've been thinking about it for a long time, how these parallels and that between Brazilian and U.S. Black people, and how we often don't realize these parallels because of, well, it's not a theory. It's more of a myth of racial democracy that purports that Black Brazilians and white Brazilians get along harmoniously when it's not the case, and you'll see examples of the parallels between their social histories and ours in the show. But I would say, but you know what, after going past grad school, I would say since then, I've been thinking about Bridget Cook's amazing book, Exhibiting Blackness. And she really talks a lot about how museums are pedagogical spaces. They're places where we learn, you know, not just go to look at pictures, we're there to learn about art and culture and social movements and national histories. And that's what makes a show like this make so much sense in a museum, and especially an encyclopedic museum, where you can collaborate and find connections between departments and really dismantle these notions of hierarchies or racial purity in certain ways that sort of like effectively happens when you have these divisions between departments, like European art, African art. And this show is showing you how African cultures are very much intertwined. Their histories are intertwined with European histories. And you're able to see that in a show like this, where you have European artists creating work on Black history. But I digress. Bridget Cook also says a lot about, writes a lot about how we need to end these all-Black shows where, you know, there's no formal or thematic connections being made between these artists. And it's just simply, well, they're all Black, so let's put them in a show. We don't know what else to do. That's how we'll connect them. And, you know, we really need to like start this practice of integrating Black artists in group exhibitions. And so this is a perfect example of a show that does that.
Absolutely.
And it shows how intertwined we all are.
I think that's one of the great strengths of the show, and I think it's something that even on the curatorial team here, we've been thinking about ways that we might carry forward the spirit of the exhibition. And I think the internationalism is really groundbreaking, because you don't often get to see, just as you're saying, these examples of great works by Black artists in conversation with more historical European works. So it's drawing all of these threads, it's mapping all of these geographies, you know, across those 6 thematic sections. And I think it's so valuable.
And there are works from your own collection that are in the show, and I'm sure, and I hope and I'm sure that you and other curators probably are now seeing new hidden histories to highlight with those works.
Because there are you know, even with the 𝘈𝘧𝘳𝘰-𝘈𝘵, it's a work in the portrait section of a Black woman in profile. But me and Catherine have talked about the ways that we might think about exhibiting certain works to kind of draw out this more international narrative. Because when you're working with a collection, I think it's not uncommon for you to tell the same or a similar kind of story. But again, like you said, there's so many possibilities, and I think it's our job as curators to think about you know, counter narratives that we can create within our galleries. Exactly.
Advance scholarship on this work. And otherwise, what else? You know, it's just dead. History becomes dead.
Exactly. It becomes canonical, right? And it becomes part of the traditional narrative that you often encounter in your textbook or in a museum. So
totally.
I wonder how your sense of the exhibition's aims have changed as you've seen it move from Brazil to Houston to DC to LA, and now here finally at Dallas.
I know. Oh my gosh. There's been so many iterations of this show now that I can't say that I have one overall kind of guiding idea about it. But I do think that what's been really exciting for me is just how the exhibition is going to cities that are very diverse and but it's actually what I think is most interesting is that this show has been able to bring something new to institutions, because I think a lot of institutions feel that they don't want to take these kind of risks or haven't been able to do these kind of like grand, large shows. Are usually small little efforts, you know, often tucked away, you know, that don't really want to embrace this kind of subject matter, because I think sometimes they think that we're going to make mistakes, we're not going to do it right, or whatever. And I think that, you know, these are opportunities that they need to take advantage of to embrace audiences that they say that they want to come out and be in the galleries. I think that I'm trying to find a delicate way to put this, but I just really feel that, you know, mistakes will be made. It's time to take these risks. It's time to get out and have these kind of shows. And I also think that audiences need to give the museums grace in certain ways, and help and support it with outreach, with donations, with volunteering to engage other audiences, because I think when those audiences come to the museum and have an interest in these kind of shows, then that's what creates change at these museums. I'm kind of rambling, but, you know, I'm trying to just really say that all the burden can't be put on this show also, right? Because you're going to experience it. People are going to come up to you and say, oh, there's not enough of Haiti. There's too much Haiti. There's not enough, you know, this country or that country. Okay, well, that's because you're putting this show can't do all the work. You're putting a lot of burden on this show. That means that there needs to be more shows.
There needs to be more.
You know, and to really have more monographic shows on these artists who are not really shown often in the States. And this is, they're huge in their own countries, but they're not exhibited outside the States enough, and especially not at major institutions like this. And so I hope people discover new artists that they want to learn more about and advance scholarship on, and have more exposure for them outside the States as well.
Absolutely.
So I just like there's more work to be done. This is just like the beginning in many ways, is how I kind of feel.
Exactly. Yeah, there's never enough of this kind of show. And I know that, you know, we were talking some about the history of these types of exhibitions or surveys, even in Texas. So I was thinking about Dr. Alvia Wardlaw's exhibition, Black Art Ancestral Legacy, which opened here at the DMA in 1989, and so it ran between 89 and 90.
Oh my.
That's a very long time ago.
Yeah.
Now,
I wasn't going to say it. You can say it.
Yeah. And then over in Houston, there's been many shows. One that really comes to mind is Franklin Sermons' Neo-Hoodoo.
Oh, with the Menil.
Yeah, at the Menil. That's, I think, 2004 or 5 at the Menil. Neo-Hoodoo, Art of a Forgotten Faith. And that's been actually a really important exhibition for my own career and thinking. Like, seeing that really early on, and the amazing catalog and the contributions from Robert Ferris Thompson and Greg Tate and other scholars was really inspiring and influential for me. But one of the things that I loved about the show is that Franklin, again, was trying to track the ways that African spiritualities have spread across the Americas, and how the ways that these kinds of contacts are also shaping the work of contemporary artists. But all that to say, I'm really excited that this show is here in Dallas. You know, and I hope that we continue to support, you know, bringing these kinds of exhibitions to the city, and you know, doing great scholarship around this work so that we can share it with our audiences.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah. Thanks, Kanitra.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what time we have. Maybe this is a good time to open up for audience Q&A.
If there are any questions.
It is.
Yeah.
If you have a question, please just raise your hand and I will bring you the mic. All right.
It's 8:24.
Hi. So, hopefully a simple question. Are there any pieces that particularly stick with you, like that come to your mind without you really trying to think of them, and why do they reoccur to you?
Oh, sure. Do you want to go first, or?
I'm already thinking of one now.
Go. Well, then
I'm thinking about, in the portrait section, there's this great portrait by the artist Barkley Hendricks, who is now late. But it's of George Jules Taylor. You'll see George in his leisure suit and a turtleneck. And I think what I love most about the portrait is that it's not, sometimes you'll see a figurative painting and it feels like the style of the subject is very confected. Like you feel the hand of the artist sort of shaping the figure style. But that one, you can tell that it's all George Jules Taylor. Like that's him, that's how he dresses, that's how he presents himself to the world. And there's such a dynamic way that Barkley Hendricks captures gesture, even in a pose, and how that is sort of carried into the world. The ways that, fashion and style are also part of the ways that we present ourselves to the world, and can even be a kind of armor, especially for Black people in a world that is so hostile to their being.
Right.
So that's one that I really love, and I would encourage everyone to check out. I tried to also wear a leisure suit last night in homage to George Jules Taylor. So
yes, you look fantastic. Yeah,
Thank
now
you.
I see the connection. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. It's funny you asked that, and this image is up right now, but of 𝘈𝘂𝘈𝘵, because this is a really important work.
Beautiful work.
For the exhibition. It's actually in National Gallery's collection, and I remember when we found out it had been acquired by our photography curator, Sarah Greenow, and we were thinking, where can we put this, and what scale will it be? We weren't sure, and we found a perfect spot that it fits in, but it was about, I want to say 9 or 10 feet tall when we installed it. And it's just this amazing image where she's sort of taking on the Statue of Liberty, and sorry, I said she, they are sort of taking on the Statue of Liberty and making us think about like who gets to represent the nation. Can it be a non-binary Black queer person, and to have them elevated to this scale to really impress upon the importance of their presence. And they've also, in the photographic process, have darkened their skin to really make it pop and to assert their Blackness in this image. It's just such a powerful, stunning work of art, and I'm just thrilled. And it's been in, I don't know if it was in Houston, but it's been in most of the iterations. Like no museum has been like, oh, sorry, we can't take that. No, we'll find a way to show it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that she's the first thing you see when you walk into the space.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
All right, next question.
I just want to thank you guys for your hard work, and both of you are so beautiful. I think there needs to be a painting of both of you on stage. I'm just amazed at the bone structure, but it's
likewise.
Really, it's ridiculous. But here's the deal: you guys are storytellers, and I had a class today on diversity for realtors, for people who promote housing, and I had started a series on embracing culture through art, because there's so much pushback in history books now. People have just gone to a place of craziness. And my question to you is, how do we go about promoting culture through art and getting not only young people and families, but also professionals to say, okay, let's go embrace not just our culture, but other cultures as well, because we're all Americans. And when we look at this art, it says so much. You know, it just speaks to us without us having to go through a lot of the pushback that we're having in so many places.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a big question.
It is a very big question.
An important question.
Yeah.
I mean, immediately I'm just thinking about what you had said about Bridget Cooks's scholarship about museums being spaces for learning.
Yeah.
And I think art is a vehicle for so much of that. I think the kind of, censorship that we're seeing around history happening across the country is incredibly troubling. And I think we have to be really nimble about the ways that again, there's so many possibilities to sharing this history, and art can be just one means of doing that.
Yeah, and it's. I think maybe we were talking about this earlier today or yesterday. I can't remember, but we were talking about how art is. It's not prized in the way that it is in other countries. It's not funded the way it should be in this country. When schools cut budgets, the first thing to go is the arts programs, always, and ignoring the fact that the arts is probably what would retain kids in school and excite them to go to school. In addition, to learning other subjects, that I'm going to go to art class also. Is exciting, and it always gets cut, and so people grow up not really feeling like they understand art or get it or don't feel comfortable in front of images because it hasn't been something that they've grown up with and been taught their entire lives. And so it's just this point, and think about it, we have secretaries of treasury, education, we don't have secretaries of arts and culture the way they do in other countries. And so, I wish I had the answer. I think those larger issues right there, like having arts being taught to young children throughout school, through schooling from kindergarten to high school, and to have funding and support from the top down, from the government, would be the way to do it.
Absolutely.
But I'll keep hoping and dreaming one day.
Hoping and dreaming.
We'll see.
I mean, I think the great thing about this show is that there's so many examples of artists who are as attentive to these histories and are trying to find ways to, from Nona Faustine to Arthur Jaffa, they're as rigorous and attentive in their thinking about these histories as any historian or scholar might be.
Right.
And they're finding ways to really present that through their practice. Yeah,
because like you were saying, if history is not going to be taught in schools anymore, or accurate, true histories, they have them come to the museum and learn history because you have images up here that will teach it to them. Get it wherever you can.
Yes, I find it really exciting to have seen the Jamie Holmes here and also in Fort Worth at the Modern. And I just wondered if you guys knew of that connection of his exhibition there and the prominent piece that you have in the category here.
We didn't know, I don't think I knew that it was going to be, the shows were going to be up at the same time from the time that, I started here at the museum in April. But it's so exciting to see a Dallas-based artist being supported across the city at different institutions. So Jamie Holmes has his first museum presentation in Texas up right now at the Fort Worth Museum of Modern Art. I'm really looking forward to going to see the show. Jamie was here last night in the galleries and joined us for dinner. So it's just great to see an artist living and working here being supported.
Yeah, and I think that show is a new series for him. So you'll be able to see how his style has evolved. Because the work in this show is from 2018 or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, he's kind of prolific. So we were in the studio just before a lot of that work was sent to Fort Worth, and yeah, he was painting all year.
It's in like a different palette too. Like it's a different
palette. The scale has changed, even the perspective.
Awesome.
Playing with different kinds of references, thinking about the history of European painting and ways that he might engage with that as a contemporary artist.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Another question right up here.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking over the question a couple minutes ago about just the importance of this exhibit. I'm curious if you have any, did you face pushback getting this exhibit into certain museums? What does the process look like of moving this into museums? And are there places where you couldn't have this kind of exhibit?
Oh.
Yeah, that's a question for you. I wonder.
What are you?
No, if you had any pushback. I mean, I don't think there was really any pushback here. I think.
No.
Yeah, everyone was really excited to mount the exhibition, but because you were involved, at the earliest stages of the project, I wonder what some of those early concerns might have been, or
honestly,
no, or if there were any, I don't.
Yeah.
Maybe there was nothing. It was like that. I don't know.
Okay. No, there wasn't any pushback really. In terms of an institution saying no, we can't have that show here. No.
Yeah.
No, that didn't happen at all. But.
Well, I guess
well,
we
no,
did.
Perez Museum did not. Perez Museum didn't drop out because of that.
No. And if you know anything about Miami and Florida, you know that Miami is in Florida, but it's not really Florida.
Florida.
It's not good.
Okay. So, no, it was just loving embraces all the way through. No problems.
Yeah.
We have another question over here. First of all, thank you so much. This is so refreshing to see in yet another era of cancellation and censorship. My question is, have you noticed any new themes emerging from contemporary artists? Because we've been through a lot lately. So I want to know if you're seeing new themes emerge from what we've experienced from 2017 to 2022.
Outside of the show.
Outside of the show, but yes, still dealing with the same topic of Afro-Atlantic histories.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like this actually connects to the show, the portrait section.
Okay.
I think a lot of contemporary artists, a lot of Black contemporary artists are thinking about representation very heavily, and you're seeing the ways that they're exploring that in their art, especially in figurative painting, contemporary figurative painting. And I think a lot of that attention to representation is as a result of a lot of the violence that we saw in those years from, maybe even say Michael Brown's murder in 2014, up through Tamir Rice into 2017. Yeah, it was a really grave time, and I think a lot of artists were, as we all were, experiencing that and living with that. And so, as a way to kind of counteract these representations of violence that were circulating in the media, I think artists were trying to find and carve space to create representations that, weren't so stymied by all of the violence, and the particular anti-Black violence that you can see here in the U.S., but is also global. Brazil is part of that story. Nigeria is part of that story with NSARS. and these global uprisings that we've had even since 2020. So there's been a lot of different changes and trends even that I think have resulted.
Yeah, I think a lot of Black artists are also trying to think about how to give more dimension to themselves through self-representation, but the dimension to really express the dimensionality of the Black experience of Black life, that it's not just victimhood and violence, it's also joy and beauty, and to say that, we aren't just victims, but in order to be fully human, you have to have all those other experiences as well. And too often you only see the negative aspect of Black life, but there's so much beauty also to Black life, and that has to be expressed as well. And so I think a lot of artists are really thinking about quote unquote Black joy and things like that in their work right now.
And I think even though we're seeing too, that's not to say that there's only one way to create these kinds of representations. I think as many artists as there are who are interested in exploring Black joy, there are other, figurative painters especially who are trying to complicate that. What does it mean that my practice is sort of being taken up by a certain kind of discourse around Black joy or positive representation? Like, how can I complicate that within my practice? So I think what you're saying about the dimensionality is really important.
Right. And one other thing that I think there's just an enduring debate within Black art is between abstraction and figuration as well. And, do I, especially nowadays when Black figuration is such, it's not a trend, I'm not gonna say trend, but it's really hot.
It's a market trend, it's hot in the market, in the art market.
And this pressure, like, oh, do I have to portray the Black body, the Black figure for people to know that I am Black, and then to respond to it as a part of this market trend that's happening right now. It's tough because you don't want, why can't the Black figure be universal as well? It's not just something to be noticed for its difference. It's actually it can be universal as well. Is basically what I'm trying to say. And so there's that issue. But then on top of it, if you're really drawn toward abstraction, and there's not this sign of the Blackness, so to speak, in that imagery, that's also like a dilemma that I think a lot of artists face as well.
But it's certainly an enduring conversation.
The 60s, 50s,
70s.
Norman Lewis in the 40s.
Yes. Yeah.
Hi, so my question kind of has two parts to it. You mentioned that when you first started coming up with the idea for this exhibit, you had just a little over 400 pieces to choose from. The first part of the question is there like a strategy or some type of method that you use to pick out the ones that you want to show? And then the second part is, what does it mean for the other pieces that didn't make the cut? Are you brainstorming on another exhibit or a little sneak peek of something?
Wow. Well, now you're putting that thought in my head.
You could make another show.
Yeah, we
Afro-Atlantic Histories Part 2.
We could do post.
Yes.
Gosh, it's so hard to go back. But look, one of the main things was I had to think about cutting the show because, first of all, it's a tour. This has to travel. It can't be 400 pieces traveling, across the country. And also you have to think about how many works a person can actually take in and absorb in one visit, right? So for me, that's under 200, like 150 or so, something like that. Well, as I had mentioned, one of the important things for me was to keep a good representation of U.S. and Brazilian artists. Also to make sure that all different types of subject matter were represented in the show as well. Again, I mentioned how I cut a couple of sections. So that was an important strategy. You know, also some decisions are made for you because not every lender is going to give their work to a tour. So, you know, I didn't even have to make a decision there because they were like, no, you can't have it. And there were also issues where certain countries, it was very difficult to borrow work from them, particularly Cuba. And there's not a lot of Cuban representation in the show because a lot of these works came from Cuba, where we don't, especially at that time, didn't have the best relations and couldn't borrow works from them. You know, what happens to the works that wasn't in the show? I mean, a lot of those works are on to other exhibitions because people thankfully got to see the original show and realize what was out there. And now people are like, you know, using those work to create other exhibitions with, and a lot of light has been shed on them. So thanks to Elio and Erison. So, you know, I can't really answer about the afterlife of those works, but I have seen them in other exhibitions. So that's exciting. But yeah, a lot of decisions went into play with making this show. And I know you even had to make decisions, you know, or you and Catherine had to make decisions about what you could show in your spaces as well. So, you know, every iteration is different. It wasn't just me making decisions, it was each venue had to make, to decide what they could show.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
I really want to thank you so much for bringing up this Afro-Atlantic histories.
Hey, Mom.
Hey, son, how are you? I'm so proud of you. I've never had to sit and watch you present, so, you know, this is really good. But we've talked about, you know, pushbacks and the fact that African American histories are being really pushed out of, you know, society in general, I shall say. There's a lot of pushback as to teaching African American history. Now, the museum is set for maybe the elites or people of a certain class. In the Afro-American community, we have a lot of young people that don't even know about their histories. So you guys are doing a good job presenting this in museums, but we have a lot of less privileged African Americans or, you know, Afros who are not going to be opportune to see something like this. I would like to know, you as artists, not just the two of you, but, you know, in America and other places, what are you all doing to push back against communities or individuals or groups that do not want these histories to be told, to be taught in our societies?
You see how my mom is grilling me?
Grilling you. I'm gonna let you take this. Well, we push back by doing our work, existing, being here, and insisting on, you know, creating the shows that interest us and our research, and, you know, that we dedicated our lives to.
Exactly. There's a lot of scholarship that goes into producing any exhibition, and so I think, you know, rigor is an essential part of any exhibition process. I like to think that, you know, accessibility and rigor can go together. You know, they're not mutually exclusive at all. And so, you know, when you see these kinds of histories being sort of excised or erased, I like to think that part of my job as a curator is to produce exhibitions that can find a way and kind of make their own angle into these conversations. Even if it isn't, dealing with policy, or it isn't necessarily a kind of historical project, but there are other ways to kind of invite artists and to really kind of take up the dialogue in their own ways and show the ways that they're responding to the world around them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'll wait for my grade.
Ade, can I add to that too? Hi, I'm Stacy. I'm the Director of Education here at the museum, and while we do have to do a lot of work bringing this out into the community, I do want to say for the exhibition, we're having several free community days because we do want to remove that barrier of price for people in the community to come see the show.
Yes.
So please look at that on our website. But what I can say is November 18th and 19th, it's going to be a free 2-day weekend with a lot of artists, tours, programs. So we're hoping to invite community here and remove that barrier of price too.
Yeah, thank you.
It's exciting. I wish I could be here.
I know. Yeah, I'm gonna give a tour on the 19th at noon. So.
Awesome. Yeah. Don't miss that. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question. We have one right here.
Hi, so thank you very much for your talk. I don't really have a question, but I do want to let you all know that just, a comment kind of in theme with some of the other questions that we had. But one of the things that was very inspiring to me, because I came to the opening last night, I'm actually going to have a talk with the Diversity and Inclusion Committee at work next week to get tickets for people at work to come see this exhibition. So I just want to throw that idea out there for anyone else who might have that in their place of work. But I think I found the conversation from the exhibition, a little bit uncomfortable, like you're rephrasing things and reframing things. And I think that's so great. So I want more people to see that. So I'll just leave that with y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My sister's here too. Hey. And my niece. Hey, Naomi.
Oh my gosh.
We can make time for one more sister or niece question. It's your opportunity.
I think you're shy. Yeah.
Thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoyed the show.
Thank you, Kanitra and Ade. And thank you all. And the exhibition is closed this evening, but you will have many more chances to see it. Please come back and bring more friends with you. Thank you.